Holy moly, it's been a minute. It's been a long minute since I've done a video. And some of you have asked about the podcast. It will be coming back. A lot to describe on that, but we're going to get into a topic. I got to start doing content. And so this one's near and dear to my heart. Guys, everybody, thank you for tuning in. If you guys want to share the video, please do that. Go on any platform that you can. I would love to be, I would love that you guys would share this to get it out to as many people as possible. Because no matter how much we teach this, it just seems like it comes back in conversation and people don't seem to grasp the importance of these topics, especially this one, church and state. And I want to start doing the simple civics type of thing, the simple civics. Why do we have amendments the way that we do? Why do we have, the articles of the Constitution the way that we do, those kind of things, history, actual letters, those kinds of things, misapplied quotes. We're going to do a lot of that stuff, hopefully consistently. So why the separation of church and state? I was listening to a friend of mine. She actually has a page, Joey Lynn Massaro. She's from Texas. She posted about a pastor in her town. It's actually getting some traction right now. And I wish I could post the video here, but I don't have it. And it's about this, obviously a lesbian type pastor. I don't know how they identify. I don't even like saying those kind of things, how they identify. However, this is what's happening right now is this person said, I'm a minister. Of course I support the separation of church and state. I don't want theology to be codified into law. No matter how many times I've taught this, no matter how many times the guys like David Barton and others, many historians that have taught this very concept of the First Amendment, which is where they think they get it from, it seems like we have to keep going back to the basics and talk about it. So we're going to talk about it this time. Again, please share the video. I'm going to try to get into this. What is the separation of church and state? Where did it come from? What does it mean? And it seems like nowadays it's being kind of used as a battering ram to stop the very thing that created liberty in the first place. According to our founders such as Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. So what is it so that we can start talking about it? Because these people think that Christians are getting involved, and maybe some Christians are. There's no question. There's Christians that I don't believe should be involved in politics, and the ones that I don't believe should be involved are the ones that don't know the Constitution. They want to legislate morality. I completely get it. But everybody legislates morality. It's belief. And so let's talk about it. What does it mean? What is it? What does it mean that we can't codify theology into law? I think theological differences are this. I don't want to force people to become Christians. I don't think that's right. I don't think the Holy Spirit would want that. I don't think God is honored by that. That is called tyranny. That's called a cult, to force people into any kind of religious sect. However, what about theology like this? Thou shalt not murder. Isn't that already a law? Yeah. That's not theology. That's prevention of harm against another. What about stealing? Thou shalt not steal. Of course it's wrong to steal. Well, maybe not in California anymore, but there's a penalty for stealing. There's a penalty for thievery. There's a penalty for perjury, lying. There's penalties for the basic tenets of the Ten Commandments. Why? Because each one of those will harm another person's liberty. What she's saying is we don't want to stop gay people from being gay. I believe you can't do that by law. That's impossible to do. You can't stop people from being gay. You can't stop people from stealing by law. It may restrain them, but in their heart, it will still be there. Someone being gay, now this is where the big problem lies with the whole gay issue. It's two consenting adults doing it, so are they really harming anybody? Well, they're harming each other. That's one thing, but this is where it gets tricky. Where does law come into play with these things? I'm not suggesting that we should use law to stop people from being gay. I do believe sodomy is wrong according to Scripture for sure. I do believe if there's a person who is gay or any other person who's not gay, whatever, to sodomize a child is absolutely wrong, obviously, and that leads to a greater conversation. But what does it mean to separate church and state? Does passing laws that stop any kind of immorality, is that theology? No. Or is it a civil society? I think that's where we have to be understanding. I don't think these people, especially these ministers, understand what the function of government truly is. What is the function of government in the first place? Is it meant to teach us how to live? Is that what the purpose of government is? Is the purpose of government to make sure that we don't tell someone that they shouldn't be gay or preach the gospel to them? Is that the function of government? Is the function of government to make sure that we don't act like children to another? Is the function of government to say that we need to correct speech? Is the function of government to make sure that transgenders can just go into public schools and libraries and things like that and do these things and protect those, but also punish those who have an opinion against it? Is that the function of government to make sure that you know how to parent your children? Is it the function of government to make sure that you are provided for by the government? Is that the function? No, none of that is. The function of government is to make sure to uphold the law and to make sure that law protects those who are the weakest. And also, law, all it does, or the government, the only function is to make sure that I have my rights. I have the freedom to choose. As a matter of fact, Christians need to understand this. People who are gay, straight, druggies, whatever, like, they have the freedom to choose that lifestyle. That's between them and God. I don't care if they believe in it or not. There's a higher authority than all of us. There's always someone higher than us. And so whether it's government or whether it's God, and government's doing their best to stay away from God for sure. What we're seeing now is, what is separation of church and state? Why does the left or the liberal or whatever you want to call them constantly cry out separation of church and state? I'll tell you what it is. Because when the left sees any kind of morality being pushed and the upholding of law itself to stop punishment of evildoers, the left or the liberal wants you to make sure to say, that's not your job to judge me that I'm doing something wrong. That's why you see these laws in San Francisco being overturned, like thievery. You can steal up to $1,000 if you want to without any kind of prosecution. That's why you see these people trying to come against Christians who are standing against the transgenders in public school libraries and public school settings, or any kind of controversial issue. Christians are standing against it. We're not passing a law about it. We're just saying, look, here's the deal. We don't want you coming into public schools. That's not what I'm paying tax money for. There should be no one inviting you to come in and push your junk. And this is the mistake Christians make. Well, I'm not able to preach. You shouldn't be able to bring in your dog. No, who said you can't preach in a public school? There's no such law or provision for that at all. There's no such law that a kid can't preach the gospel in a public school. As a matter of fact, you can sue because you have a First Amendment right to believe what you believe. The freedom of speech and those kinds of things. There's no such law that says you can't read the Bible in a public school. There's no such law that says you can't pray in a public school. Well, we've believed this lie. And so what's happening now is they're saying, look, we need to keep God and government separate. They have no idea that our government was actually founded on the ideals of Christianity. I'm not saying it's founded on Christianity itself. The ideals of it, the morality of it, the Hebrew Republic. Read any of the founders' documents. And this is one of the biggest problems we have, is we don't understand the First Amendment. Why do we even have it? If the First Amendment, if religion wasn't important to the founders, let me ask it this way. If religion was not important to the founders and they wanted to keep all this stuff separate, why was it the first thing they wrote to be protected from any laws of Congress? The second thing, when people decry separation of church and state and they say, you preaching in a public school or any school in general, or even talking about God and government, separation of church and state, I'm not Congress, dude. I'm a person. I'm not creating a congressional act to codify Christianity as the number one religion in this world. And they've been using this sentence as a battering ram to silence Christians. And yet Christians don't get it. It's like, I'm not Congress. I have the freedom and the ability to preach anywhere I want to because of the First Amendment. I don't have the right to force people into the religion. I don't have a right to disrupt. I don't think that's cool. I think that's actually not even just a law. I don't think that's even a law. I think it's just common sense. We don't want to go in and just disrupt places with the gospel. I think it's a jerk move. If the Holy Spirit's leading you there, he'll open a door. And the only way it'll close is if the Spirit of God truly offends darkness. And that's the way it should be. But the separation of church and state was never meant to keep Christ out of politics or Christianity out of politics or anything like that, because everyone votes how they believe. Everyone votes how they believe. If you don't believe in God and you vote, you don't have the morality that I do. As a matter of fact, now the morality is, and you're seeing this on college campuses, especially with Charlie Kirk, you're seeing this on college campuses right now. There's actually kids out there that believe we should be able to kill children even after they're born. I've seen video after video. There's kids out there, because of the atheistic worldview, and I don't care what you say, it's because of this atheistic worldview. We take God out of everything. Now we begin to determine, well, we should be able to kill babies now. We should be able to kill children, toddlers. We should be able to kill kids up until the point that they can talk. I mean, this is what it's coming to. So they can vote for what they want to vote for, but I can't vote to protect life and children? This is why I don't agree with a lot of conservative movements that say abortion is a states' rights issue. We don't have the right to determine when life begins. None of us do. That's God's jurisdiction. Matter of fact, the first thing guaranteed in the Declaration of Independence is life. We have to protect it from all forms. We have to protect it in all forms. Life. I'm talking about human life. And so when you're seeing this, people are coming out and saying we shouldn't use Christianity to determine law. Let's look at some of these laws. Why don't we speed? What is it going to do eventually if we continuously speed in areas that are like for blind kids? I'm just throwing a hypothetical. It'll hurt kids that can't see. Why do we pass that law? For prevention. Is that not a good ethic? Is that not a good thing? Sure. Do we take it too far? Here, I'll tell you where it takes it too far. Permits. I got to replace the windows on my house and my door. I got to get a permit for all these things. I think we're taking it a little far with that, obviously, in the city governments. But what about when government starts to tell you how and when to worship? We saw that in 2020, 2021. We saw where churches were being prosecuted and persecuted for opening the doors and telling us what we could and couldn't do. How come government was allowed to violate the separation of church and state then? How come it was cool when your side did it, but when we say, hey, man, we want to stand against immorality of any kind, it's separation of church and state? Let's talk about it. The First Amendment is very clear. The separation of church and state, you guys, most of you know this, but I'm just going to, that's why I want you to repost it, because we need to keep this conversation alive. Just repost this if you can. Listen, and Andrew, you're right. They're up to uphold the law, not create laws. That's exactly right. But I want to talk about this. It's this simple. The Danbury Baptists of Connecticut were really scared because they started writing this thing called the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibit its free exercise thereof. They were kind of scared about that. They're like, this is the first time we ever saw government was supposed to keep things separate and free. The church was supposed to be the church, government's supposed to be government. So they write a letter to the president, Thomas Jefferson at the time, and they said, look, we are excited that you're president. That's amazing. We love you. It's the first letter. But then they go, listen, we're kind of messed up here because we left England because they were a kind of a church sanctioned government and vice versa. Church sanctioned government, government sanctioned church. We didn't want that. That's why we left there. We were left for religious freedom. Why are you guys doing this? Why is this law passed? Thomas Jefferson then responds, I'm cool with that. Like, I'm cool with what you guys are saying. I think you guys are misunderstanding what the First Amendment means. It was written to protect you. It was meant to build a wall of separation of church and state. In other words, Congress cannot pass a law that violates your rights or your free exercise. We're supposed to keep government out of your church, but nowhere did it say the vice versa. Nowhere did it say church can't go into politics. It only restrains Congress from passing laws against the free exercise of religion and to promote one church over another, or a national religion, if you will. So that whole premise right there already falls to the ground. It never said that Christians can't be involved in politics. Quite the opposite. Let's look at John Peter Gabriel Muhlenberg, who fought in the Revolutionary War as a pastor. His brother was actually one of the ones that helped codify the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment of the Bill of Rights. He helped codify that. Signer of the Bill of Rights. It was John Adams and his brother, Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg, that helped sign that document. So, yes, Christians were involved. We saw pastors and clergymen. 26 of the founders actually had seminary degrees. These guys were Christians. There's no question they were Christians. And they were involved in government. And it's never stopped before. And so what's happening, though, is as immorality prevails, like Andrew just commented, because people are allowed them to, because immorality prevails, we're trying to stay away from God instead of running to God. I'm going to remind you of something. It was Benjamin Franklin said that only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. Why do you think they wanted to protect religion, Christianity in this sense? Because that's what keeps people free. If we are a virtuous people, we know not to maim, to steal, to kill, to harm, to hurt, to be stupid, to act lewd. We weren't going to do those things as a good Christian people. Virtuous people don't need laws, external laws, to restrain themselves because they're inwardly restrained by the conscience already. That's the purpose of religion, is believing something, there's greater rewards and punishments coming in the next life. John Adams talked about it. Washington talked about it. They all knew that government stood underneath God. They understood. And that's why we do this. That's why we educate these kinds of things. And laws were never meant to restrain liberty. Remember, an action is no longer under the purview of liberty when it violates the liberty of choice or the choice of another. I can shoot a firearm if I want to. I have no problem. Like, I shouldn't be restrained to shoot a firearm. But what happens when I take that same firearm and instead of defending my property, I go after another person's property? No, it doesn't matter. I have a knife in my hand to cut bread, or I can stab somebody. My liberty is I can have a knife, I can have a gun, I can free speech, I can create my religion. What happens when my religion starts to restrain the rights of another? In other words, by saying you can't be an American citizen unless you're Christian, you can't be, you shouldn't deserve to live unless you're Christian. That's where the separation of church and state came in. But it's not to stop morality. Morality is so important to a nation. And if you guys haven't seen this already, we're trying to win this war politically. We're trying to see the right and the left kind of dominate and win. Y'all, the left aren't going to be won by politics. The liberals not going to be won by politics. The liberals going to be won by the gospel. They need a heart transformation before any type of law can change, before any type of season can change, before we see any kind of restoration. President Trump is doing what he can right now. There's some things I disagree with. We've talked about that before, but there are things he's doing that are necessary to uphold law, but it's all going to be for nothing if he's the only one passing it and the change in the sentiment of the people doesn't change. Because then all of a sudden the next guy getting in will reverse all that stuff, and then we'll go on a pendulum swing, and then the next guy will get in and they'll reverse that and they'll go on a pendulum swing. Unless the sentiment of the people change, laws won't change for the better. You ever notice government today never says, man, we should give our rights back, we should give the rights back to the people. We should just break down government into sections, destroy this, except for Trump when he's like, hey, we need to get rid of the Department of Education and such like that. But to stop government from growing and to reverse the trend and give the liberty back to the states, back to the people where it should be, according to Articles 9 and 10. That's because we've left off God. Because people cannot self-restrain themselves by inward morality, we need an external moral source for that. Proverbs 28:2. Because of the transgressions of the land, many are the princes or the laws thereof. We need more bureaucracies because we can't restrain ourselves from our passions. We love to do what we want to do instead of what we ought to do. Now, I see the tide turning. I believe we're doing this. I believe it's important. But this is just a quick video on saying to you, separation of church and state was never meant to restrain the Christian from entering into politics. Quite the opposite. It was actually giving permission for, actually not even giving permission. There was no stated thing that it wasn't possible for Christians to be involved because Christians helped write the thing. Christians wrote that. That was the whole point. It was meant to stop government and Congress from passing laws. So whenever someone brings it up to you, separation of church and state, you shouldn't do this in a public school. I'm not Congress, bro. I have the liberty to do what I do. As a matter of fact, read your state constitution. It'll tell you have the exact same thing. You have the freedom to worship God in your conscience. Now, if you're in a public school, if you're in wherever you're at, your home, your church, you're out in the streets, you have the right to worship God freely in your conscience. No big deal. You have the right to be a Christian and to go run for city board and school boards and city councils and county councils. You have every right to. Just make sure you're following the law and make sure that everybody has liberty. That's my only caution. If you're a Christian and you want to run for politics, great, go for it. But uphold the laws. Don't pass laws that'll make people stop sinning. You can't do that. Because you know what's going to happen next? When let's say your seat's gone and a liberal comes in, they're going to pass laws against you. Because you're opening that door. Don't do that. Give people their liberty and be a moral force. Be a moral guide to show people why law is important, only to stop those from being maimed or hurt or property being taken. Hope this makes sense. You guys are awesome. Please comment down below. I thank you for Andrew for commenting. I love you, man. I love that you comment. And please share this video with whoever you can. We're so grateful. We'll continue these little things, these civics moments as best we can. Forgive me. It's been a couple months, but there's a lot of cool things to explain when I really get, you know what I mean? God's been working some cool things behind the scenes, and I needed this little break to do that. So guys, God bless you. We will see you next time.